Welcome to Action Network's coverage of the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup, presented by Bet365. Today, we're going to be looking at the semifinals, and in particular, the first matchup between Sweden and Spain, two of the four final teams remaining. If you're looking for the preview of our second semifinal, that is also on our YouTube channel and in the Action Network app. Before we do get started, remember this show is presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in New Jersey, Colorado, Ohio, Virginia, and Iowa. Bet $1 and get $200 in bet credits. Terms and conditions apply. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. I'm Anthony Davundo, joined by Anna Whitty, an NWSL broadcaster and expert in the women's game. She played herself at Penn State. Also joined by my co-host from Wonder Goal, BJ Cunningham. This is a very exciting matchup. Spain and Sweden, two teams that have pretty much played their best in their last match, I would say, overall coming into this tournament. Anna, what did you take away from Spain's last-second win against the Dutch and that match altogether, and how do you feel like it applies heading into the semifinal?
Spain is a team who's going to play their style no matter who they're playing against. In the first half against the Netherlands, they maintained the majority of possession, but the Netherlands did a really good job of taking away Bonmati. She only had 61 touches in this match, and she's that facilitator for this Spanish side. Additionally, Spain had a ton of shots on goal, but could just not capitalize. So moving forward for Spain, they have to find ways to find goals in the back of the net, capitalize on opportunities a little bit closer to the six. But you got to credit Netherlands and how well they defended and in transition, how they found their opportunities. But the Spain side is consistent. I think they do such a good job of that possession oriented style that against Sweden, they're going to have to do the same exact thing, but shore up their defense a little bit better.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was, we had seen the Dutch play with the ball for pretty much the entirety of the group stage. Even against the US, they had a lot of defensive possession. And how would they fare when Spain was able to really press them and keep the ball? And the first half, I thought, was pretty ugly from them. I mean, Spain took the first 12 shots of the match. They created a ton of chances, hit the post a couple of times. The finishing wasn't great from Spain, but the Dutch kind of looked overwhelmed. But really, you saw the Dutch kind of click into gear later in that second half and play what was a pretty competitive final 45. BJ, I guess the question is, we've seen Sweden play this style, play a more defensive kind of counterattacking style against the United States and, keep the US off the board. And then we saw them kind of take it to Japan last match. What do you make of Sweden coming into this matchup, and kind of how do you break down a match between Sweden and Spain? I know you changed your pick to Spain prior to last round to who's going to win this cup.
I did, but I'm increasingly becoming more and more confident in the Swedes to get through this round. So that match against Japan was incredibly impressive because what they did is they had advantages physically with their height, and they used that on set pieces and with their build-up play. I mean, Sweden took the first 12 shots of that match against Japan. I don't think we would have said that coming into it. And they were really physically imposing them for really the full 90 minutes until they went up, obviously 2-0, and then they kind of sat off and played more defensive. Like you mentioned, they played a low block counterattacking style against the United States, which, wasn't that impressive. Like, it was okay. Like, they held them out for, the full 120 minutes. But in this match, we've seen it with Spain over and over again. We've talked about it at length. When they're out of possession and they play teams that are good in transition, they tend to crumble. It's what happened against Japan. And like you mentioned with the Netherlands, they really weren't that good at trying to build out or trying to play in transition against Spain. I mean, let's be honest, Netherlands had no business taking that match to extra time. I mean, Spain took, like you mentioned, the first 12 shots up until the 85th minute. Shots were 17-1. Like, Netherlands, but what happened is Spain tried to play their high line. They got caught sleeping, and Netherlands goes in and scores, and it's 1-1. And next thing you know, it's a free-for-all in the final 30 minutes of extra time. So I do like Sweden to advance here. I think that they can play well in transition. They're very, like we mentioned many times, they're a team that's adapted to the style of play of who they're playing. And these two teams have played before in a friendly in April. It was a 1-1 draw. Sweden scored early. Spain ended up scoring around the 85th minute. Expected goals were pretty close. Spain controlled a lot of possession, which is probably what you're going to see here. But there were 34 shots in that match. And I think that's something else that we need to mention is that Spain, although they hit the post a bunch of times, a lot of their shots have been pretty inefficient. So I think Sweden can do a good job defensively here, going up against Spain's high possession style and beating them in transition. So I like the Swedes at +155 to advance. I'm going against my pick against Spain.
Anna, I'm going to go to you. What were your reactions to Sweden, Japan? You picked Japan, and they were pretty well outplayed for the first 75 minutes. Sweden kind of, showing its mettle after, hanging on against the US and then throttling Japan. Where do you come down on the Sweden team? Because I feel like you've kind of been in the middle on them coming in here. And do you think they can pull off the upset against Spain, or are you taking the Spanish, who you also picked to win the World Cup when I asked last round?
Yeah, I think Sweden, to BJ's point, they play in a 4-2-3-1, which means formationally, they're going to play a little bit more defensive oriented, and they're going to make sure that they have their defense shirt up before they go forward. That is what allows them to be so talented and be so strong structurally against these teams like Japan and potentially teams like Spain, because they understand how to break them down and they're not worried about scoring. They're just worried about making sure that they don't allow their opponent to do that. And that's what they did against Japan, is they allowed Japan the possession to have the ball at moments. And because Sweden is so strong in the air, they're physically bigger and a little bit faster than this Japanese side, they were able to exploit the opportunities once they did pick up the ball. I said in the last preview before the Japan game that Sweden was going to have to capitalize on set pieces. And that's what the Swedes did. That was the opportunities that they had. And the fact that they were able to capitalize on those gives them that confidence going into the semifinals against a pretty similar Spanish side. Spain has more opportunities. They lead the tournament in shots right now, 129 shots, which sometimes doesn't mean much. Teams get opportunities, they just can't score. Sweden clearly has a phenomenal goalkeeper in Musovic, who showed that not only against the United States, but also against this Japan side. So if Sweden's goalkeeper continues to play the way that she's been playing throughout this tournament, if their defense stays shored up and they don't get too disorganized by the possession of this Spain side, I think they have the opportunity to find themselves in the final.
Okay, I'm going to give my pick now. I think that the Dutch were not a great matchup against Spain because they're not as comfortable out of possession, and they wanted the ball and they just couldn't keep the ball, and it was really kind of overwhelming them for large stretches. I think Sweden is much more comfortable playing that style, and I think that will make this a much more interesting match. I'm going to go with BJ, and I'm going to pick the upset. The market's pretty similar to what it was last round, and I do think the Swedes are better than the Dutch. Overall, they're better. They have an efficiency on set pieces, like Anna mentioned, both goals in that match. Whether it was the fluky tap around in the penalty area goal or the penalty, both coming from set piece issues for Japan defensively. We haven't really seen Spain get tested a ton on set pieces, but I think they could be the kind of team that struggles given their willingness to always want the ball and have the ball. And we've seen this with Spain time and time again, where they get caught out, caught napping, caught in transition. I think Sweden does just enough. I think this goes to extra time, and then the Swedes advance. So I did bet some Sweden plus a half. So that's to win or draw, and I'm going to take them to advance to the final. We just keep picking Sweden, BJ. We're going to keep riding with them.
Let's hope we can get it one more time.
All right, that'll do it for our first semifinal preview. Thanks to Anna and BJ for joining me. We will be back, and you can check out our video for the other semifinal preview, and we'll also be doing the final and the third place game going forward. So thanks, and stay tuned to all of our Action Network FIFA Women's World Cup videos presented by Bet365.